Hey guys, welcome to Dwindling Elves. I've got a review of the new Dark Elf Army book. So I bought the book yesterday and I've gone through it. So what I've decided to do is give you an overview of each of the sections, and this video in particular will introduce the army and will deal with all the Lord and Hero level characters. But I will not be doing the special characters. I'm going to do that in another video at the end. So each of the videos is going to cover one specific section. So this one's on characters, the next one will be on core, then special, then rares. Then I'll have a video at the end, or another video, that talks about list synergies, so list building, so going into specific builds and which units work well together and how to bring everything together. So the army special rules. So Dark Elves this edition got Always Strikes First, which I'm sure is going to make a lot of High Elf players annoyed. Me playing both armies, I don't mind so much. It makes the matchup for High Elves a little bit more difficult. The other thing they gained is Murderous Prowess. So what happens there is you reroll all ones to wound, which I think will help a lot of units, but especially Executioners. So Executioners getting Always Strikes First means they strike at initiative, and rerolling ones to wound is going to be huge for them because they're strength 6 and normally you're going to be wounding on a 2 or a 3+, so they'll be re-rolling most of their wounds. And they kept Hatred High Elves, but they do no longer hate everyone else, so that's another change from the previous edition. So we're gonna start with Lords, and I'm gonna put these guys in order of relevance, or the way that I see they're relevant. So we're gonna start with the Supreme Sorceress, which is almost a mandatory level 4. Then the Dreadlord, then the two new Lord characters, the High Beastmaster and the Black Arc Fleetmaster. So this is Supreme Sorceress. She was reduced in points, but I think her stat line stays pretty much the same. She now has access to all 8 lores, which is a welcome upgrade, and the new Dark Elf lore. So depending on your list, certain lores might provide new synergies. So having access to Lore Life, I personally don't like Lore Life, I think it's boring, but having access to it helps a lot, considering that Dark Elves are pretty killy, with rerolling pretty much all to hits, and then rerolling a bunch of to wounds. So killing things is not going to be your issue. Staying alive is, because most of your guys are still toughness 3-5 up armor. So Lore Life will help you, keep them alive, and there's some other synergies which I think we'll talk about in the last video. But it's nice to have, that flexibility and play with all 8 lores. Then there's the new Dark Elf lore as well. Now the special rule they got is Hekardi's Blessing. Now this is like the High Elf lore attribute, where they get +1 to cast their own lore, so a level 2 will actually get +3, and a level 4 will get +5 to cast spells. So I think she has access to a bunch of things. She can ride a Cold One, a Dark Steed, and be on foot. She can ride a Dragon, a Manticore, and a Dark Pegasus. Now the two builds that I see moving forward are on foot in a bunker, and then I would give her Talisman of Preservation for the 4 board save. I think that'll help you with potentially miscasting, and unless you're running Lore Life, you really want to protect her because she has no way of getting wounds back. And then I think I would also give her the Sacrificial Dagger. So the Sacrificial Dagger is now it's changed, so you can kill a guy, and on a 4+ you get a power dice instead of automatically. So it's no longer a guarantee, but you do it after you cast your spell. So if you need the extra power dice, you can choose to do it after, so you don't have to kill anyone beforehand. And it's also useful because that way, if you roll 1/6 and you don't want to roll another dice in case you miscast, or maybe you do want to miscast if you really want to get a spell off. So I think those two are provide good synergy, and then I'll get into what type of bunker you should be running when I get to the core section. I'll get into more detail, but you're probably looking at Corsairs there, and I'll go into that in more detail in the next video. Now the other way I could see her being run is very mobile, and in this case I would put her on a Dark Pegasus. So obviously you can't use the Sacrificial Dagger because you won't be in a unit, so I would instead give her a Dispel Scroll, and I would also give her the Cloak of Twilight, which is an enchanted item, and what it does is it gives you a 3-up ward save against all shooting and magical attacks. So that should protect her pretty well from any type of ranged weapons. Now onto the lore of dark magic itself. So, like the High Elf spell book, the Dark Elf lore has 2 signature spells. The first is Power of Darkness. It casts on an 8+. It's an augment, and it gives a 1 unit +1 strength, which is nice. I think a lot of the core units are either are strength 3, so getting +1 strength on them will be useful. And in addition, even if you cast it on Blackguard, who are strength 4 with their halberds, they go to strength 5. It's a nice spell. Now, you also have the option to add D3 power dice to your pool, but if you get 3 dice, the caster suffers a wound with no armor saves allowed. So this is where the Talisman of Preservation comes in again, so it'll save you half the time against that. So you get I think this is a great spell. You get the +1 strength bonus plus potentially 1 to 3 dice extra, which I think is, I think it's a great signature spell. I think it's probably one everyone's going to revert to. Then the second signature spell is Doombolt, which casts on a 12+. It's a magic missile with range of 18, and it does 2d6 strength 5 hits. So having a magic missile that does 2d6 strength 5 hits, I think, is pretty great. The casting value is relatively high, and you can actually get 46 strength 5 hits, but then the casting value goes up to 24. But I think this is a great spell. It's useful against pretty much everything. You can wipe out fast cav units, you can snipe monsters with it. A lot of the new monsters are toughness 5. The ones in this book are, the ones in the Lizardman book are. A lot in the High Elf Dragons and Fire Flame Phoenix are also toughness 5, so it's a very versatile spell. I think it's also another one that you will keep, depending on your list. If you're playing a defensive list, so if you've got lots of shooting, then this is a great signature spell that synergizes with that. The first spell is Chillwind, which casts on a 5+. It's a magic missile that has a range of 24 inches and does 2d6 strength 2 hits. And if the target suffers any unsaved wounds, all models in that unit get -1 penalty to their ballistic skill. So this is one that you're going to be targeting at other people's shooters. Now, I think this is a pretty good spell as well, and it works well within the Dark Elf list, because Dark Elves are still a lot of toughness 3 and 5 up armor saves. You don't see a lot of ballistic skill shooting out there, but it will absolutely murder your guys very quickly. So if you're not running a lot of shooting yourself, but you want to do counter shooting to keep your guys alive, this spell will help in that. The second spell is Word of Pain. It casts on a 9+ and has a range of 24 inches. And so all models target so this one reduces a target unit's weapon skill and ballistic skill by D3. And you can cast a more powerful version of this, which reduces the strength and initiative by D3, and that casts on a 12+. So again, I think this is a great spell. So it does kind of what Miasma does in Shadow, but it has the additional option of reducing strength and initiative. So it's useful in all cases, because you can either reduce people's ballistic skill while you're not engaged in close combat, but once you are engaged in close combat, depending on what you want. If you want to reduce weapon skill so that they're only hitting you on 5s or 6s, that's a good one. Or if you want to reduce strength, this will keep your guys alive. Again, it really synergizes well with the army, because again, the weakness of the army is health and defense, and this helps to augment that indirectly. The third spell is Blade Wind, which casts on a 9+. It's a direct damage with 24-inch range, and every model in the target unit must pass a weapon skill test or suffer a strength 4 armor piercing hit. Another great spell. It's particularly useful against hordes, especially hordes of other toughness 3 elves. So if you see a horde of white lions out there, or a horde of swordmasters, take 30 or 40 strength 4 armor piercing hits. It's gonna I think it'll hit them. Well, it's not going to work well against them. I guess it's going to be better against Empire Hordes because, yes, it is a weapon skill test. So, but this has synergy with Word of Pain. If you reduce someone's weapon skill by D3 and then cast this spell on them, it really doesn't matter how high their weapon skill is. So again, a great horde clearing spell. Spell 4 is Shroud of Despair. This is a hex spell that targets all enemy units within 12 inches. Until the caster's next magic phase, the target cannot benefit from Hold Your Ground or Inspire's Presence rules. In addition, whenever a target fails a leadership test of any kind, all target units, including one that failed, suffer -1 to their leadership until the start of the caster's magic phase, or next magic phase. This is a very situational spell. Against some armies, it's not going to matter so much. Against dwarves, who cares if they can't use the Inspiring Presence? Not being able to use your BSB will affect some armies more than others. I think the people who really suffer here are horde armies. I'm looking at orcs and goblins, maybe Empire, so low leadership spell armies. Again, situational, but very useful in the right situation. Then we've got Soul Stealer, which casts on an 11+. It's a direct damage spell. So place the round template anywhere within 18 inches of the wizard, and then it scatters d6. All models are hit by the template suffer a strength 2 hit, with no armor saves allowed. So this is very useful against knights. Roll a d6 for each unsaved wound inflicted by Soul Stealer. For each roll of a 4+, the caster immediately gains a single wound to a maximum of 10. The wizard can choose to extend the range if they do so 36 inches. If they do so, it casts on a 14+. So this is a great spell for keeping your wizard alive. It's double synergy here. It's useful against cavalry. It's not so great against toughness 4 armies that have high toughness with no armor saves. So it's not really going to be that useful against ogres. But on 6s, you'll be getting wounds back. So that's nice. And then there is Arnzapansel's Black Horror, which is a magical vortex that you can either use the small or large round template, depending on whether you cast it on a 15 or a 25. And then so you place the template. Once it's placed, the player then nominates the direction in which the vortex will go. Determine how many inches the template moves, roll an artillery dice, and multiply the result by the caster's wizard level. So again, on a level 4, it's going to go a lot further. Any models touched by or passed over by the template must pass a strength test or be slain outright with no armor saves. They may make a single ward save. So I think, again, this is a useful spell. That's another direct damage spell. So now, I forgot to talk about the lore attribute. So anytime you cast a Hex, Magic Missile, or Direct Damage spell from this lore and you roll doubles, that unit takes 2d6 Strength 1 hits with Armor Piercing Special Rule, and if you roll triples, it suffers 3d6 Strength 1 hits with the Armor Piercing Rule. So again, you're doing more damage here. So this lore is very much damage based, as well as a couple of hexes to strength and weapon skill. So it's a mix of shadow and, I don't want to say fire, but it's a magic missile-y direct damage oriented lore, which I think works better with defensive armies. But you do have spells like Power of Darkness, Word of Pain, and Shroud of Despair that'll help you in close combat. So it's not a toolbox. What you're going to be looking to do with this lore is a lot of direct damage and really whittling your opponent down, which can be useful. So now we're going to be moving on to the Dreadlord, who is your standard Lord level fighting character with elf stats. So he's got weapon skill 7, initiative 8, leadership 10, 4 attacks. Combat Lords are really not in this edition. Now he has access to pretty much all the mundane equipment. You can give him additional hand weapon, halberd, lance, great weapon. I wouldn't recommend a great weapon considering that it'll nullify your rerolls to hit. I think you're better off with a halberd there. You can give him the repeater crossbow, handbows, or brace of handbows. I don't know why you would. And then he's got the you can give him heavy armor, shield, sea dragon cloak, and he's got all types of mounts from the Dark Steed Cold One, Dark Pegasus, Manticore, Cold One Chariot, or the Black Dragon. So I think if you're gonna run the Dreadlord, it's probably because you want to run a Black Dragon. I think this is the most viable build. Generally speaking, I think you're much better off with a level 4 Supreme Sorceress. This edition has always been about your level 4, and combat characters have really been taken out of the equation, at least in a competitive sense. Now, so I would give him, I would use him as, if you want a Black Dragon, I think this is the best mount, the best hero lord to take to get the Black Dragon. You can give the Black Dragon to your level 4 Sorceress, but why would you? You don't really want her in combat. Now, there's a couple of items that work well on the Dreadlord that don't work as well on other characters. So the first is the Black Amulet, which is 60 points, and this is a talisman. So it gives the Dreadlord a 4+ ward save, which is always useful. But if he gets into a challenge, and for each successful ward save he makes, the person that he's in a challenge with takes 1 wound with no armor saves allowed. So this is one way of cutting through a 1-up rerollable character very easily. He still gets ward saves against it, but you're going to be doing extra wounds against these super hard to kill characters. So that's one use for that. Now the second is the Ring of Hotek, which is a 50-point talisman, and this gives the bearer magic resistance 3. And then all enemy wizards within 6 inches suffer a miscast on rolls of double 1s as well as double 6s. So it's situational. I think if you're going to use that item, you're probably better off putting on a Dreadlord or a Black Dragon, because he's going to be flying into the enemy's lines pretty quickly. It's not that great of an item, but this is probably the best place to put it. So the second so another option is the High Beastmaster. So he's also a lower level character. He has 1 fewer attack and leadership, and he's 300 points. So, but he must be mounted on either a Manticore or a Scourge Runner Chariot. So he gets one of those 2 for free. So he ends up being around the same amount of points as the Dreadlord. But so for his 1 fewer attack and leadership, he trades that for the Beast Slaver rule. Now, Beast Slaver means that 1 monster within D3 inches, which is probably generally going to be the Manticore you're riding, gets an additional D3 attacks. So that may or may not be good. Now, the one benefit is if you take this guy and you're running a monster mash list with lots of Hydras or the other new monster, you could potentially give it to one of those Hydras or the other new monster, which might be better. But so you have some flexibility there. Now, his 2 options are a Manticore, and the Manticore has 2 special upgrades. One is Ironheart Skin, which gives him a 4-up scaly skin, which isn't going to protect you against the cannonballs that you're going to be taking or the bolt thrower shots, but it will help you against the regular ballistic skill shooting. Again, it all depends on your meta, how useful that is. And then Blind Rage. So the Manticore gets an additional plus D3 attacks. However, all enemies get +1 to hit against. So if you take that one, in combination with the Beast Slaver rule, your Manticore is going to have plus 2d3 attacks on top of his 4 attacks. So he's gonna, you could potentially looking at 10 attacks for your Manticore, which are weapon skill 5, strength 5, and have killing blow, and they're initiative 5. So it's really not that too shabby. Plus, on top of his Thunder Stomp, I mean, this guy can really grind out units. His downside is he doesn't really get a lot of protection. You can protect the High Beastmaster pretty well because he comes with light armor and Sea Dragon Cloak, and he's mounted. So he'll be pretty, you can give him a 2-up rerollable pretty easily and pretty quickly. Now the second option is the Scourge Runner Chariot. So instead of putting him on the Manticore, put him on the Scourge Running Chariot, which is a new thing, and it's got a ballistics, it's got a strength 7 bolt thrower on it. Now, the High Beastmaster is also Ballistic Skill 7, so you're pretty much going to be hitting anything on 2s with this, which makes him a really good monster hunter for 300 points, that is. So you're putting a lot of points into a Super Bolt Thrower that is mobile. It is on a Movement 9 Chariot, so you're pretty mobile. And so what the Ravager Harpoon also has another special rule where when it inflicts a hit, it pulls the monster, if it inflicts a hit on a monster, it pulls the monster d6 inches closer to you, and if you pull it more than 3 inches, it'll do an additional wound. So half the time you'll be doing d3 plus 1 wounds, and you're hitting on 2. So it's situational. If you're fighting a lot of monsters, it could be potentially good. You can probably knock one out in 1 or 2 turns, depending on how lucky you get. But again, you're paying 300 points for this guy to do so. I mean, 300 points is 4 bolt throwers, 4 regular bolt throwers, which might serve you better, and it doesn't come out of your lord choices. So it doesn't eat into your Supreme Sorceress's points. Now, the last lord is the Black Arc Fleetmaster. He's about the same amount of points as the other 2 fighty lords, but he has master level stats across the board, with the exception of the additional wound. He has a special rule called Show No Weakness. So if this guy kills an enemy character or kills in a challenge, or even without a challenge, the unit becomes unbreakable for the rest of the phase, which is super situational, and I don't think it's all that good. And the other downside to this guy is only 50 points of magic items. So I think he's in here for the fluff. If you want to run a pirate army, that's very much viable. But I don't think this choice is super competitive, especially given how many points he is. I really think this guy should have probably been 50 less points than he is in order to make him viable. But that's just my choice. So I don't think you'll be seeing many of these unless someone wants to play a Corsair army. So now we move into the heroes, and what we've got here is the Death Hag, the Master, the level 1 or 2 Sorceress, and the Canine Assassin, who is now officially a hero. So I'm going to start with the Death Hag because I think she will be the character that we see the most. Now she's got, hero level stats with the addition of Frenzy and Poison. So she starts with 2 hand weapons automatically, which I wouldn't change out. So she has 5 attacks with always strikes first, so she can be rerolling hits, rerolling ones to wound, and she's got poison. So 5 attacks of murder. So she only has the option of taking a magical weapon, so you can't give her any defensive gear or armor, which sucks. And I don't even think, unless you put her on foot, I would give her the Fencer's Blade so that she's weapon skill 10. That might keep her alive a little bit longer. But I don't think this is going to be a character that you're going to be seeing alone on foot. I think the only reason you would take her is to get to the Cauldron of Blood, which we will talk about later. But first, she has 3 options though. It's that in lieu of getting any type of war gear, she has Gifts of Cain. And the first is Cry of War, which means she has the Fear special rule. In addition, all tests taken by enemies in base to contact with this model must take the leadership penalty at -3. So that's pretty useful, especially considering that's pretty useful. So you could easily reduce people's weapon skill to 1, which means you'll be hitting on 3s with a reroll. And that means they're only hitting you on 5s. With her, that makes a big difference because that's pretty much her only line of defense. Then she has Rune of Cain, which gives her an additional D3 attacks. So yeah, that's just more murder. I mean, she's a frenzied crazy person. And Witch Brew, which actually gives her and the unit Frenzy. And if they already have Frenzy, they get +2 attacks. So there's more synergy here with the Witch Elves. So if you put her in a unit of Witch Elves with Witch Brew, those Witch Elves are going to have 4 attacks apiece. So those are no slouches in combat, but more on Witch Elves later. Now she has the option of being a BSB, which I think is pretty much mandatory. I mean, you need a BSB in every list, so if you're going to be taking her, make her your BSB. Now, since she doesn't have access to, she only has access to magical weapons and no defensive gear, this is one of the few cases where I'd actually advocate giving your BSB a magic banner instead of other gear. So the ones that I like are the Standard of Discipline, because Leadership 10 is always nice. The Swiftness banner, because if you're going to be playing her, she's going to be in a unit of Frenzied anything, either Witches or Blackguard, whatever you put her in. So movement 6/5 is nice, and then there's also the Razor Standard, which again synergizes better with Witch Elves and Blackguard, because you're going to have a lot of strength 3 attacks, but if you're not going to be able to punch through armor. 2-up armor still is a 2-up armor save, so with the Razor Standard you can reduce 2-up armor to a 3-up armor, or with Blackguard 2-up armor to a 4-up, which will help you a lot. So taking a magic standard on her is actually viable, and I think I would recommend it. So the real reason why you would take the Death Hag is the Cauldron of Blood. So I don't recommend a Death Hag on her own. I think if you're just going to run her as a BSB, I would just take a Master, because he's got access to defensive gear and he will survive. She will not on her own, because you're looking at 2 wounds, toughness 3, with no armor or ward save at all, unless you take her on the Cauldron of Blood, which I think is, I wouldn't say it's an auto-include, but it's an auto-include if you take Death Hag, and you're gonna be seeing a lot of these, and I would also recommend it. So the Cauldron is 190 points on top of the Hag. So if you run her as a BSB without any gifts on top of the Cauldron, you're looking at about 300 points, which is 100 points more expensive than it used to be, but it used to be broken. So the Cauldron gives you a couple of things. So Blood Shield of Cain. The Cauldron itself has a 4-up ward save, which is nice. It confers a 5-up ward save to the Death Hag riding on top of it, and if it joins a unit of Witch Elves, they also get the 5-up ward. If it joins a unit of anything else, it gets a 6-up ward. So if you put it in a unit of Spearmen or Corsairs or Blackguard, they get a 6-up ward, but Witch Elves, they get the 5. Fury of Cain. So this is a bound spell that gives your unit Frenzy, cast on a power level 3. If you already have Frenzy, it gives you +2 attacks. Now, this is not cumulative with Witch Brew, so you won't be getting +3 attacks. So if you take Witch Brew, this spell isn't really worth it. Unless you want to cast it on another unit, that is. And then Strength of Cain. So we know that the special rule that the army has is Murderous Power, so reroll once to wounds. Strength of Cain means all units within 6 inches, including the unit pushing it, reroll all the wounds. So not just your ones, you reroll everything, which is amazing considering you're going to get rerolls to hit, and now you're going to get rerolls to wound. If you put this in the center of your army or behind your lines, you got 3 units that are rerolling to hit and to wound. Now this synergizes best with Witch Elves and Blackguard. Not so much Executioners, because again they're going to be rerolling once to wound anyway, and you're probably wounding everything on 2s anyway. And then it has Will of the Gods, so it means that it's a chariot that doesn't need to be pushed by a unit, so it can move on its own, and it's a chariot that can march. And it also does d6 + 1 impact hits. So I think the Cauldron is pretty amazing. It is subject to Frenzy, so yeah. Depending on your meta, people could just chaff it. Now, yeah, and if you it gets redirected, and it can be easily flanked, so you have to be careful with that. So units that I would put the Cauldron in are either Witch Elves, obviously, because they get the 5-up ward, and then they get Super Frenzy from the Fury of Cain, or if you take Witch Brew automatically, they get Super Frenzy, so you're looking at a horde that has 4 attacks from the front rank, and it really protects them with a 5-up ward save. I mean, this unit is going to be, you know, unmovable. I mean, yeah, they're only strength 3, but they get to reroll all wounds. You're gonna have something like 60 attacks coming out of this unit with rerolling to hits and to wound. So whatever they run into will die. Especially if you get any other magic buffs off, like Power of Darkness +1 Strength is nice on this type of unit. Now, my personal choice would be Blackguard, but I think I'll get into that more later. I'm personally, I think Witch Elves are fine in core, but I won't be taking them for a number of reasons, which I think I'll discuss in the next video. Now, I like Blackguard because they're stubborn. Now, giving them, they have 2 attacks apiece also, but giving them the extra attack from the bounce spell is nice. But having strength 4 is also nice, which means, you know, the rerolls to wound will still help them a lot. And then if you have the Razor Standard on the BSB or in the Blackguard unit, and some combination of Standard of Discipline as well as the Swiftness Banner, this unit's going to be movement 6, running into anything and murdering it. And Blackguard still get a 6-up ward save from being in this unit, so I prefer Blackguard. I think any other unit is a waste of time. Executioners probably shouldn't be pushing this thing. I really like Executioners, but wouldn't use them as Cauldron pushers. So yeah, I think you're going to be seeing either a lot of Witch Elves or Blackguard pushing these units. Now, if you're not going to take the Cauldron of Blood Death Hag BSB, what you should be taking, or what I think you'll see a lot of, is the Master BSB. So he has access to all the same options as the Lord, so tons of mundane equipment, as well as 50 points of magic gear. Now, I see him being either put on a cold one in a night bus or on foot. So the equipment that I would give on the cold one is the Sea Dragon Cloak, which now gives you 5-up Scaly Skin, which is nice, so it synergizes well, or combines well with the rest of your armor. And then heavy armor, so that brings, and mounted on a cold one, that brings them up to a 1-up armor. So you don't need a shield. So if you don't want to take a magic weapon, it means that you can take the halberd, which I like more than the lance because I'd rather be strength 5 all the time than strength 6 once and then strength 4 after. I think the halberd offers more versatility and more consistency. And then there's any number of builds. I mean, this guy, you can run, there's tons of options. I think the top 4 I've put here, but it's obviously this is not an inclusive list. So I like the Dawnstone on him, so a 1-up rerollable armor save is always nice. You can give him a magic weapon or not. It really depends on what you choose. There's also the Crown of Command and Luckstone, so you've got a 1-up with 1 rerollable and then the Crown of Command. So if you put that in your night bus, that's pretty useful. Then there's Preservation and Luckstone, so you got a 1-up and a 4-up and a 1-time reroll on your 1-up. And then there's also the Black Dragon Egg, so that's one of the new items. So it's a 50-point item, and it gives, for 1 round, it gives you Strength and Toughness 6, and it gives you a Strength 2 breath weapon that does not allow armor saves. I think this is a quirky item. I don't think by any means it's an auto-include, but it's a real surprise. If you get into a challenge with this guy, and you end up taking this Black Dragon Egg, all of a sudden your Toughness 6, Strength 6, with 3 attacks, and then if you got a halberd, your strength 7, you're going to do some damage with rerolls to hit. It's a one-time use, it's quirky, but it's an option. I think it's viable. The other alternative is taking him on foot, so this is also very viable now because with the Sea Dragon Cloak, you can easily get a 1-up armor save if you take an enchanted shield. And then I think the same equipment applies. You can take Dawnstone and a magic weapon, Crown of Command and Luckstone. If you take Crown of Command and you put this guy in a horde of Executioners to make them stubborn, it's pretty solid. I don't think a horde of Executioners will be losing many combats, but it could happen. And then Preservation, Luckstone, or the Black Dragon Egg, all these apply as well. So I think a Master is an auto-include if you're not taking the Death Hag BSB on the Cauldron. Then the Sorceress, so she's just a scaled down version of the Spring Sorceress. Again, she has access to all 8 lores plus the Dark Elf lore, and she gets the +1 to cast from her own lore. I really like her with both signature spells. I think Power of Darkness with +1 strength and +D3 power dice. If you get that on both your wizards, You can easily turn a magic phase around. It's potentially, if you cast that, it's an extra 6 dice and 2+1 strengths. So I really like that, the fact that you can cast that one twice. And then I think Doombolt is really good on her as well. I mean, I would always roll for spells in case there's one that you really want, but the 2 signature spells on a level 2 are pretty useful. I think she's a scroll caddy. The sacrificial dagger isn't as good on her. I think you're better off having that on your level 4. And the other way to run her is again on the Dark Pegasus if you want something really mobile. I think it works really well on a Dark Pegasus because you've got a lot of direct damage and magic missile spells that you can't cast once you're in combat. So with the Cloak of Twilight, you lose your scroll, but you have a 3-up ward save, and on the Dark Pegasus, you also get an extra wound from the Pegasus. So I think, yes, putting your caster on a Pegasus makes them more vulnerable to war machines, but they're far more mobile, will stay out of combat so they can cast their magic missiles. But I think on a level 2, it makes a lot more sense to put her on the Pegasus. And the Cloak of Twilight really should help her, so that's one build that I'm really looking forward to trying out. Level 2 with both signature spells, or maybe one of the other magic missiles or direct damage spells with the Cloak of Twilight. You can just fly around freely, and you can keep your level 4 in a bunker. So I think you'll be seeing a lot of level 2s out there. They're pretty useful. Last but not least is the Canine Assassin. So he's a hero level character who's got weapon skill and ballistic skill 9. He's got initiative 10, so most things are going to be hitting him on 5s, and he's always going to be striking first. Or hitting first anyway. And then he also has 2 other special rules, fighter but not a leader. So he's leadership 10, but no one can ever use his leadership. So it's the same as the old rule. And hidden, so he's deployed in a unit and you can choose to reveal him at any time. Again, that's the same as the old rule, so it's, yeah. Then he's got 3 options, as well as magical gear, but you can take forbidden poisons. So you can take Black Locust. So for each unsafe wound you do to a character, they suffer -1 leadership. I really don't think this is a good one. I think you should be putting your upgrades into being more killy. You really don't want that character to survive, and it's super situational. I think you're better off, spending the points on either Dark Venom or Manbane. So Dark Venom gives you Killing Blow, which again will kill characters faster, and that's the entire point of this guy. Or Manbane, which will give you +1 to wound. So this makes it more useful against high toughness. He's only strength 4, but he does have poison attacks, so I think assassins have their use. I think it's a nice surprise. I don't think it's game breaking or anything. So I'm not going to be trying these guys out first anytime soon, because I try to minimize characters and I'd rather spend the points on more guys. I think having an extra 5 or 6 Blackguard or Executioners is more useful than taking this guy, but he is a nice surprise, and he could potentially jump out of a unit and heroic Killing Blow, or Killing Blow something, sorry, not heroic Killing Blow. That would be nice though. So in summary, I think the Supreme Sorceress is still the go-to lord level character. I don't think any of the lords are particularly worth it beyond her, unless you really want to run your Black Dragon or the Beastlord on a Manticore, who I think is cool. He adds a little bit to the Manticore, and the Manticore can be an absolute killing machine, but he's still soft. Toughness 5, 4 wounds, no armor is not that hard to kill, so I'd be worried about, getting the Manticore chopped out from underneath the Beastlord, and then he's completely, boned. The heroes, I think, provide a lot of choice and options, and I think all 4 of those are very viable. The Cauldron is awesome, but again, it can be frenzy baited or redirected, so that is one weakness it has. But if you want to run a Death Star list of 50 guys in the Cauldron, it's not going to go there anywhere. It's going to murder anything it runs into, and it's going to deny a lot of points. I think all 4 heroes are viable, and they add a lot. I think if you want to add variety to your army or character to your army, through characters, I think the heroes allow you to do that. Each one adds something very specific. I think the Master is very viable, but I would only take him as a BSB if you're not taking the Cauldron. If you are taking the Cauldron, take that as your BSB. The level 2 Sorceress on a Dark Pegasus with the 3-up ward save against shooting and magic is really nice, especially if you give her the lore of the Dark Elf magic lore. Lots of magic missiles that she can cast and stay out of combat. Very versatile. The Assassin has his place. I think he's a glass hammer. I personally wouldn't run him, but he is useful. He can one-shot characters, which is always nice. But I think the points are probably better off spent on more guys. I mean, 5 or 6 extra executioners is probably better. So the next video will be on the core selections. Hope you guys enjoyed it and got some useful information out of this.